Welcome to another episode of the Five Senses webcast. I'm your host, Robert Zinni, and today our guest is Dr. Tom Rusing, who's a retired general surgeon and currently the vice chairman of Save the Dells. Tom, thanks for joining the show. How you doing?
I'm great, and thanks for the invitation. I'm excited to be here.
Thanks. I am too. And so we are doing a segment on you called Prescottonian Spotlight, where we want to give our viewers and also the community members a little insight about who you are as a person and how you have impacted Prescott for a long time. And so I think I'm correct. You've been living here in Prescott since the 1960s. So how did you end up in this small little town?
Well, my folks were living in Los Angeles, and I was born, and about 9 months later, we moved up to Fairbanks, Alaska. And my dad, whose brother was up there, asked him to come up and start a bakery. So he went up, started a bakery. My mom put up with 9 years in cold Fairbanks with 5 kids under 10. And finally, an opportunity came up in Prescott, kind of to do the same thing. And so my dad, mom, and the 5 of us moved down to Prescott in 1961. And then my dad opened up Julianne's Bakery downtown next to where the Plaza Liquor Deli is now.
Okay. And so for our viewers who live in this ever-growing urban center of Prescott, what was Prescott like back in the 60s when you first got here?
Well, if you're familiar with the area where the Plaza Liquor Deli is now, the only thing on that whole block was a small Safeway. And so it was dramatically different. Back then, there was probably about 10,000 people. The basic courthouse downtown was similar. There were not a lot of new buildings, but a lot of changes have taken place since that time. But I think the biggest thing is that, from 10,000, it's grown to about 40-some thousand now. It had a lot less paved streets, a lot less street lights. Prescott Valley was just a kind of a gas station and a little mini mart at that time. Chino Valley was much smaller, so the whole area was much less populated. So it really was a lot different. We didn't have a lot of the big stores and a lot of the fast food places and all that. But it was a great place to grow up, and it's interesting. Even from early on, I knew the place was special. And when you go to school and travel, you see other places and you live in other places, and you go, Prescott is a great place. So it really worked out great when in 1986, Kathy and I moved back here, and we've been here since that time.
Nice. So you say that our community is special, and I agree with you. And I've only lived here for about 12 years right now. And so I want to know, from your perspective, what makes this place so special, so that makes you want to come back every time you leave?
It's funny you say that because every time I came back from college, I'd be driving into town, and I'd get this great feeling. You come down Gurley, and you look at Thumb Butte, and then you drive down Elks Hill, and you see the courthouse and all of the beautiful trees or the Christmas decorations, whatever season it is, and it just had a great feel. So there's so many things about Prescott that I think make it special. One is the downtown courthouse. That's unusual. In my travels, there just weren't that many places that had a center like the Courthouse Plaza, with the businesses all around it. It's kept up well, a variety of different events and things you can do down there. So I think the courthouse is really a real attribute to the city, and it's fortunate that people have had the insight to preserve it. The 4th of July activities around there, all the events on the courthouse, and then the Christmas things all really make Prescott special. And you can tell that by all the people that come up just for the weekend or just for those events, because they are unique. And many cities are just kind of spread out, and they don't have something that you can identify as the heart, the core of the city there. So that's one thing. I think the Western heritage is a big deal. It maintains that small town feel, because when you go downtown, it still has that, a relatively a small town feel to it. The surrounding natural environment is dramatic. As I said, the Thumb Butte was one of the things that the first people that came here to set up or to at Fort Whipple, I think, that was one of the identifying marks was Thumb Butte. They initially looked out in the Paulden area, but then realized that they really needed to come in, and Thumb Butte was that dramatic landmark. So that, Granite Mountain, yep. Granite Dells, the national forests that surround us is a unique situation. Mm-hmm. And the other thing that people, we talk about the beautiful mountains and everything, but the other things are those beautiful grassy plains that are between here and Chino, out towards Prescott Valley, that just offer a wonderful contrast to the dramatic mountains and everything around us.
No, I agree, and it's the diverse ecosystems that we have here, or the biomes, that for me makes me really enjoy this area. I love going on the trail and running. But you're a surgeon, but I can tell just from what you're saying and also from your button that you're somewhat of an environmentalist. So you are also the vice chairman of Save the Dells, and I was wondering, what have you guys been up to in 2021?
Well, I joined Save the Dells in, it was interesting, as I was finishing up my career as a surgeon in the end of 2017, people are asking me, well, what kind of things are you going to do? They tried to get me involved in things. And I said, I think life is going to present some opportunities, and I want to be able to respond. And right about that time I retired, some friends were talking about Save the Dells. And I've been concerned about the quality of the growth, the extent of the growth, what it's doing to the character of the town. I see what's happening outside on the edge of Prescott and some of the other communities, this kind of sprawl that's going on, the mass grading, the sea of rooftops. And I said, that's just not Prescott in my opinion. When I was growing up, I saw that in other places and knew that's not what I wanted to see happen here. So Save the Dells is really, when it first started, was focused on that core area of Granite Dells that was so unique and iconic. And so that was really what the focus was of Save the Dells group. But to me, that was a worthy cause in and of itself. So I joined the group, and I think I had, it's a diverse group with people of all ages and expertise, and just a dedicated group of people that identified and were willing to spend the time to try to preserve that area from development. And it's been a real battle. And I think for a lot of us, we tried to work with a lot of the city people and just didn't feel we were making much progress. And so that's when my wife, Kathy Rusing, she stepped up to try to change the culture on the council, to try to change the outlook or the vision on the council. And so going through that election really opened a lot of, it opened doors, but it also made me a lot more aware of what was going on and what needs to be done for the future. So Save the Dells worked very hard for several years, and fortunately we've had some wonderful leadership on the Save the Dells committee. Amber Fields and Paula Burr were key people in the development of the letter of intent with Arizona Eco Development. And they really brought a lot of passion, expertise, and common sense to that process. And the letter of intent was actually something that I think most of the people in the city and Save the Dells were comfortable with. And so I think Save the Dells made a tremendous contribution from the initial plans that were proposed to the city to the plans the basic plans that came out of the letter of intent. At about the time that the letter of intent was finished, things changed on the city, and all of a sudden Save the Dells was left out of the negotiations completely. We've had really limited communication or feedback from the city in regards to what's happening with the development agreement, because the development agreement really is the next key thing that's going to take place, and that'll be what the city council looks at to decide if they want to complete the annexation. Fortunately, because of the letter of intent, we're cautiously optimistic that things are moving ahead in that way. So, but we also realized not only through Kathy's campaign, Kathy Rusing's campaign, but also Save the Dells over the last 3 years, that we've really got a feel for what the citizens of Prescott and the region are concerned about. And so it wasn't just Save the Dells, it was about other issues. But Save the Dells really resonated with the public, as did Kathy's campaign. And so I think we as an entity realized that we have a fair amount of influence in the city, and that we need to perhaps change our goals a little bit. And so we kind of revisited things in the last 6 months. And so we relisted our priorities a little bit. Our first priority still is successful completion of the AED annexation in a way that's fair for the citizens of Prescott, a win-win-win kind of a situation. And so that's our number one goal. And second is the ongoing monitoring of that goal. Because if you know how the city works, once an annexation takes place and they have a basic development agreement, that's kind of a structure. But frequently the developer or individuals can come back to the city and request changes that can change the initial intent of the development agreement and what the people expected. So the citizens may have been comfortable with the development agreement, but if it keeps getting changed, is the result too far from what we really started with, too far from what we really wanted? So I think Save the Dells feel that one of our roles is to keep an eye on that process over the next several years. Okay. The second thing that really became important throughout this negotiation was everybody in Save the Dells understands how critical water is to the current citizens and to our future. It's a valuable, precious resource, and we feel that currently the approach to it is too optimistic, not conservative enough with that precious resource. And so, what we also found is that water became part of the negotiations for the AED annexation. Therefore, Save the Dells we left water to other groups such as the Citizens Water Advocacy Group, CWAG, and they have a team of experts that are just amazing in their dedication and the amount of time and effort they put into it. And but they're also not a political action committee like Save the Dells is, so they're limited on the kind of interactions they can have with the city. But it became very important, and some people are using the term now, land for water. So the core of the Save the Dells for water. And, that's not an unreasonable thing, because Save the Dells the Dells core critical 500 acres, 475 acres, has a lot of value. And water has a lot of value. So the negotiations got more complex at that time. And as I said, fortunately, several Save the Dells leadership people were there to help guide those negotiations. But I think we realize also for the future of Prescott, water is critical. And water is tied to growth. You can't really separate the two. And we know that the more growth you have, the more people you come in, the more water you use. Even if we're using less water, even if we're conserving, the more people come in, the more water we use. So we have to really be thinking about that in terms of water policy. And so for us at Save the Dells, water was critical. I'll take a step back. The second most important thing we thought, or our second goal, was this year's election. Okay. We think that this year's election is very important for the future of our city. And we think that trying to identify and support the right people for this next election is critical for the future of Prescott. And if people, we talk to people all the time that are not happy with the amount of growth, the sprawl, the character of the growth. That's the other thing I talk about. It's not always, I go to some cities where it seems like they've done growth very well, and they have design review committees that when there's new development and things, it fits into the terrain, to the character of the community better. And so I think those are, so for us as an entity, while the AED annexation is number one, we think next year's election is very important to get this year's election is very important to get the right people on council so that citizen groups like Save the Dells don't have to work so hard to try to get the city moving in the right direction, or what we feel is the right direction. Same thing with CWAG, that we have the right people there that really have great respect for that precious resource. And instead of an overly optimistic idea of how much water is out there based on paper water or legal water, what is really out there? What water is really available? And the growth here is really tied to the flow of the Verde River. So if you start talking about water, you start talking about that precious resource, which is the Verde River, one of the a unique river in the state, but also the country. So that's our second. The third was water. So the election, water, and I think the fourth is just basically or tied to number one is the regional park preserve concept. So when Save the Dells first started, the first thing we were looking at is that core of the Dells. But a parallel path, a bigger picture, was this regional park and preserve. So that area, that whole area around there. Because if you're talking about preservation of the natural landscape, if you have just a small area surrounded by development, it has an entirely different impact on the people and the wildlife and everything. So that regional park and preserve would preserve the critical habitat for the critical habitat, wildlife corridors, and then the iconic beauty, as well as the multiple benefits of having those things in the city. A park in terms of the health benefits, the physical benefits, everything, and economic benefits to the community. So that is so those are our four main goals: the AED annexation, completing that along with the regional park, water, and this year's election.
Where are you at in the process with the annex and the regional park? Because I agree with you, having that regional park status, I would not only bump up tourism, but again, like give another shiny object of why Prescott is really cool to live here.
Well, and I think things are moving ahead with the AED annexation. I think we're cautiously optimistic. So then it's just going to be a matter, as soon as the development agreement comes out, that gets put out to the citizens of Prescott so that they can carefully evaluate it. Save the Dells will certainly be carefully evaluating it, as well other groups, I'm sure, because it impacts a lot of things. And so we'll be working hard to try to make sure that development agreement is fair for the citizens. So that's coming up soon. And so I think the city's motivated. I think the developer's motivated to get this done. And I think they have a negotiating team that's made progress. So we're cautiously optimistic on that. We're hearing some positive things, so we're excited about that. It's been a long course, so we're excited about that. The regional park, we got a lot of activity about a year ago. Year and a half, about a year and a half ago, right before COVID started. There was a number of us that went down there on several different occasions, working with Noel Campbell, as well as a person from the city, their kind of lobbyist, I guess it would be, working with committees to try to get this bill passed through that would have provided some state funding for this idea of a regional park preserve. And we were very close. We went through, Kathy and I and several other people spent several nights and days down there lobbying and working and meeting with different committee members. And we seemed to be getting good traction. And then all of a sudden things got shut down. So that is still a dream. We look at that. A lot of us like to think of that as our Central Park, our New York Central Park here, because it is such an amazing place for the people of New York to be able to, of all that hustle and bustle, to be able to get into that area and regenerate their engines, to recharge, to to run, to relax, and all that. So it's an amazing resource for the citizens, but also visitors. And we see that as a real draw for tourists from all over the state, the country, and the world come here to enjoy that area. So that's still a significant goal. And I think if things go well, I think we're going to have the motivation among the citizens as well as the leadership to make that happen.
All right. Well, let's hope. I mean, that's some great work that you're doing here in the community. And, from my perspective, what better way to have somebody involved with an organization like Save the Dells who's been here for 60 years, who have seen the town of 10,000 grow into where we're at right now. So that's great. And as far as your other endeavors, you are also known for your volunteer work. So I was wondering, like, what is like one unknown project that you were a part of or that you led that really impacted you the most?
That's a hard question. There's a lot of things that I think in somebody's life that you feel are sentinel events or important events for you that they're kind of life changing. I think when Kathy and I went to Africa, we were there for 6 months at this small hospital in the Central Highlands of Kenya, and that was an amazing experience, not only medically but culturally and just on environmentally, just an amazing place. And I know other people that have spent time. It's a little different if you just go for a week or two, but if you're there long enough, Africa gets in your blood. And there's so many people I know that have spent an extended time there that you just start talking and the same feelings come out. It just was an amazing place. So that was on many levels, a truly kind of life-changing event. It was something that I'd been thinking about a long time, and Kathy and I had, and it came together in kind of an amazing way. But this was just this little tiny hospital called Tumu Tumu Hospital, and so that I would say that probably the next one was ended up spending 2 weeks after the earthquake in Haiti, and I remember. I was practicing at that time, but I remember sitting in front of the television, just newscast after newscast, the extent of the devastation. Nothing. I'd seen other natural disasters, but nothing to this, that fast, that many people that were dead and wounded, and it just tore at you. And so I said, I felt like I couldn't sit on the sideline, and so. After many, many phone calls and emails and all this other, I was able to connect with this organization called Project Medishare that came out of Miami. And two doctors had clinics down there long term. And they ended up, after the earthquake, putting together this kind of emergency thing right on the airport grounds. And so we had 4 big tents, one for volunteers, one for older patients, one for pediatrics, OBGYN, and the operating room. And these were just big tents with kind of air being flushed through. And then we had a supply tent. And it was very well organized, amazing people that were down there. We'd have like 100 or 110 volunteers there at a time. They had a charter aircraft coming out of Miami twice a week, carrying volunteers down and taking volunteers back. You loaded up the plane. This is a big plane, and you loaded up the plane, and then you got to the airport in Port-au-Prince, and we'd all get off the plane, and then we'd start unloading all the supplies from the plane. And a lot of the volunteers were coming from Miami, so it was just a quick 2-hour flight for them. For me, it was a bigger jump from Arizona down. So a lot of them stayed for 5 days. I ended up staying for 2 weeks, and there were people from other organizations that would come and want to volunteer because there was such good work being done. It was rewarding and fulfilling, and I just found like a equally shorter, much shorter, but equally dramatic and life-changing event. And I'd have to say that you asked for one thing. The other thing was Kathy and I volunteered in Gallup at the Indian Medical Center, and talking about a part of our culture, a part of our country that was really hit hard based on a lot of things, pre-existing situations, not only health-wise, health conditions, but also just the nature of the reservation spread out and less electricity and water and all that. So people that were really hit hard by it, but how the community of Gallup and the amazing long-term people that work at the Indian Medical Center, I was there, Kathy and I were there for a month. Those people, that's their calling. These doctors and nurses that's their career, and the dedication of the volunteers, the medical staff there, and just the amazing different tribes. It wasn't just the Navajo; there were the Zunis and other pueblos and all, and that. Really, in the midst of COVID, I think if you think about the earthquake in Haiti, how dramatic that was, COVID has been really life-changing, dramatic for all of us, and to see it happening at that scale changes, kind of changes your life.
Thank you, Tom, for joining us on the Five Senses webcast. I'm Robert Zinni signing off. You can find more information about Five Senses at 5enses.mag.com or find us on Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram.